On a rather chilly evening of April 2022, Mark woke up in a field near Brant, Ontario, with absolutely no memory of how he ended up there. He stood up but quickly realized that even though he is not gravely injured, he has minimal strength to be on his feet. He sat back down and went on to contemplate his next move. Earlier in the morning, Mark and Serena woke up together. It was a Sunday. They had been together for about 3 months, but developed a mutual bond that neither of them experienced before. Having said that, they were still learning and understanding each other. Both were in their early 30s and carried some unresolved traumas from the past. However, they understood that and were trying to build something real together. Mark lived with his younger brother Adam in Cambridge, Ontario, and Serena had recently moved into her own place in Caledon City. It's about an hour drive. Mark would drive down to see Serena over the weekends and sometimes on the weekdays as well, depending on his schedule. This weekend was no different. However, Mark did not drive down, but took a rideshare instead. Adam's car was at the auto shop, so Mark decided to leave his car with his brother in the case of emergency and took an alternative way to travel to see his girlfriend. This was the plan. Mark would arrive in Caledon on Friday evening around 7 p.m. They would attend an event on Saturday, and on Sunday noon, Serena would drive to Milton to see her parents. Mark would tag along, get dropped off in Milton, and Adam would drive from Cambridge to Milton and get Mark. Both brothers would have lunch somewhere and drive back home to Cambridge. The weekend was going as organized. The couple attended the event on Saturday, had a great evening, and slept really late. Woke up around 10:45 a.m. on Sunday, still pretty tired and drained from last night. They began casually discussing something that transitioned into an argument. Both weren't thinking clearly, and soon it turned into a fight. Serena left the bed angry, and Mark wasn't sure if he needs to apologize or be upset about the situation. Serena would get awfully quiet when upset, and that would put Mark in his shell. Still, he tried to approach her, but she shut him down. Mark did not know how to communicate in this situation and almost wanted to call his brother and be picked up from Caledon to avoid the awkward ride to Milton with Serena. However, he still decided to bite the bullet and stick to the original plan. He figured this way he can be with her for the maximum amount of time, and maybe she would break her silence and they will have the opportunity to resolve things. That is exactly what Mark did. Without sharing a word, Mark and Serena got ready. When the time came to leave, he hopped into the passenger seat with her to endure one of the most awkward rides of his life. Serena kept driving, did not share a word. Meanwhile, Mark messaged his brother, Adam, approximate ETA, and a meeting spot in Milton where he'd be dropped off. He also sent him a text indicating that his phone's battery is very low and might die by the time he's there. In that case, he asked him to just be at the decided meeting spot in Milton so there are no complications. Mark didn't have his phone's charger, and Adam understood. After about 45 minutes of silent driving, Serena slowly pulled over to the decided spot around 3:15 p.m. That happened to be a park. Mark looked at her to see if she is ready to talk, but got nothing. He thanked her for the ride, grabbed his bag, and got out of her car. She quickly drove away. He sat on the bench, devastated. He was bummed about how a beautiful weekend turned out. He got a text from his brother telling him he'd be there in another hour and a half due to something coming up. Mark replied, "Okay, I'd be here." That would be the last text Adam would receive from Mark that day. When Adam was 25 minutes away from the park that Mark was supposedly waiting at, he texted him. The text was never delivered, but it didn't worry Adam, as he knew his phone was almost out of battery. Adam got there at around 5 p.m. and pulled over by the park. He did not see Mark. He got off the car, walked around the area to find Mark, but did not see him anywhere. He tried to call him just in case he managed to charge his phone, but it immediately went to voicemail, indicating the phone is still out of battery. He texted Serena, and she confirmed that he was dropped exactly by the park and didn't hear anything from him since. Adam decided to wait for his brother and hoped he'd show up in few minutes. Adam would be there for another 2 hours without a sign of Mark. He started to get paranoid and informed Serena about the situation. She drove to him in a few minutes and told Adam her side of things regarding their fight and how things went down after that. Serena began to feel that Mark is acting out due to their fight, but Adam denied and reassured her that Mark never reacts this way to conflict and would never put his brother in this situation. Serena became anxious and suggested to go to police. Adam, on the other hand, wanted to try a few things before taking this to the authorities. There were a few restaurants across the street from the park. Adam and Serena walked into them one after the other and asked the staff if they saw Mark by showing his picture on Adam's phone. Sadly, no one recognized him. Adam contemplated going to the police but saw another bar and grill restaurant a few blocks away. He wanted to check it out, but Serena questioned, why would he go to a farther one when he didn't go to these closer ones? Adam understood her frustration, but still wanted to take a chance. And he would be right. The bartender recognized the Mark's picture immediately. She would tell them that Mark came to this restaurant around 3:45 p.m. and had a burger with some fries, along with a couple of drinks. Adam was happy to know something about Mark's whereabouts, however a bit confused. Mark rarely consumed alcohol and would never drink in the middle of the afternoon. They tried to inquire more about Mark's trip at the restaurant but did not get anything. The bartender simply stated that Mark made small talk with her, asked her about her neck tattoo, and passed some positive comments. That was it. Disappointed, Serena and Adam were about to leave the restaurant, but the bartender called out to them. "I remember one more thing," she said. Both returned to inquire. She continued to say, "I remember before leaving, he took out a bottle of pills from his bag and popped 2 pills. I remember that because he asked me for a glass of water right before that." Adam tried to ask what the pills looked like, but bartender had no answer. He later turned to Serena and tried to inquire if she knew he had some pills on him. Serena had no idea and did not know he was taking something. Both left the restaurant more confused than before. Serena suggested maybe he took a generic painkiller or something. He knows better not to take something serious with alcohol. At this point, Adam was slightly annoyed with Serena. He partially blamed her for this situation and out-of-character behavior of his brother. He couldn't digest the fact that Mark consumed alcohol in the middle of the day and also took some mystery pills right after that. He politely asked Serena to go back to her parents and he'll let her know whatever transpires. She resisted but ended up agreeing only if Adam would go to the police. Adam accepted. It was close to 9 p.m., still no sign of Mark. Adam sat in his car, checked his phone anxiously, hoping to see a text from Mark, but that would not happen. He ended up calling the police.
911, what's your emergency, please?
They dispatched 2 officers to his location and took his version of events. After taking everything down, the police suggested that he's probably cooling off somewhere due to the fight with his girlfriend and might turn up tomorrow, but they'll still patrol around and look for him. Adam still didn't believe Mark was in complete control of the situation, but hoped the officers are right. That night, instead of going back home to Cambridge, he decided to stay in a motel in Milton, just so he'd be potentially closer to Mark in case he turns up. Mark did not have a car, so it was less likely he'd be at a distance of a larger scale. Adam checked into a motel, plugged his phone in the charger, and got into bed. He was tired but had no intention of sleeping. He kept staring at his phone, hoping to hear from Mark, and called his number occasionally, which would directly go to voicemail.
Automatic voice message system.
Adam couldn't stop thinking if Mark is okay or something terrible had occurred. Should he call his parents and let them know about what's happening? He thought about all of it and decided to keep this to himself till he is certain of the situation. By midnight, he couldn't stay awake any longer and ended up dozing off. Around 2:40 a.m., he woke up to a call from a number he didn't recognize. He quickly picked up and said hello. To his surprise, it was Mark on the other end. "Hey man, can you come get me?" he said. Adam couldn't believe it and proceeded to ask for his whereabouts. Turns out Mark had somehow ended up in the city of Brant, which is an hour away from Milton. It did not make sense how and why someone without a car would end up an hour away from where they were supposed to be. Adam was confused, but did not care about the logistics of it in that moment. He got the address, checked out of the motel, jumped in his car, and drove away to get Mark. Adam reached at the address around 4 a.m. Mark was sitting on the porch of a house that was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by fields. Adam pulled over, rushed to Mark, who limped his way to the passenger seat. Mark had injured hands, some scraps on his face and neck, and injured right knee. Once settled in the car, Adam asked him what the hell happened, to which Mark responded, "Just drive." Adam called the police to let them know he had found Mark. They advised that someone will drop by the next day at their home in Cambridge to see what happened. Adam and Mark reached home sometime before 5 a.m. Adam tried once more to inquire and found out that Mark does not remember anything about yesterday, apart from waking up in the field and finding a home nearby to make the call to Adam. Next day, the police came by and interviewed Mark. Later, investigated on their own to find out what transpired between the time Mark was dropped off at that park in Milton and when he woke up in the field in Brant. After days of investigation and whatever Mark could remember, the following is what actually happened on Sunday. Mark was dropped off at the park in Milton around 3:15 p.m. He sat on the bench, saw Adam's text, and discovered he is running late. He decided to wait, but couldn't take his mind off the fight he had with Serena. He figured, there is no point in sulking here, and decided to walk to a restaurant, eat, and try to take his mind off the whole situation. He decided to walk to the bar and grill restaurant a few blocks away, as he was contemplating having a drink to calm his nerves. Around 3:45, he got to the restaurant and quickly ordered a burger, fries, and a cocktail. He was served shortly. He made small talk with the bartender and asked for the cocktails 3 more times. Once done with his food and drinks, he waited there for another 15 minutes just working through the fries. Later, he called out to the same bartender and asked for a glass of water. Once served, he pulled out his medication and took 2 pills from the bottle, finished his glass of water and headed out. No one knew this, but Mark was recently diagnosed with anxiety and depression. He was experiencing panic attacks and was prescribed a drug called Xanax. It's a common drug for anxiety-related symptoms, but when mixed with alcohol, the results can be dire. Mark knew this. However, due to the fight with Serena and how miserable he felt about the whole situation, took him back to his previous relationships and issues he faced then. It all piled up and took him to the brink of a panic attack. It started when Mark got out of Serena's car. He was hoping to get picked up soon, so he wouldn't need to be by himself. When that did not happen, every move Mark made after that was to contain his panic attack. He tried to distract himself by walking to the restaurant, eating, talking to the bartender, drinking cocktail after cocktail and trying to avoid the drug. When nothing seemed to work, his impaired mind decided to pop 2 pills of Xanax to resolve the issue. Once he left the restaurant, he began walking towards the park where he was supposed to meet Adam. Unfortunately, due to how drunk he was, he ended up walking the other way in a different direction. He walked for 15 minutes and realized he is nowhere near the park. He stopped and looked around and couldn't place himself. He had no idea where he is. All he saw was fields. He tried to be calm about the situation and strategize his next move. By then, Xanax had kicked in, and he could feel his heart rate slowing down. He got extremely worried. He decided to not wait for his brother and hitchhike to Cambridge instead, as he could feel his system slowing down. Few minutes went by, he finally saw a vehicle passing through. He waved for it to stop, and it did. It was a man in his 50s who decided to help him out. Mark requested the man to buy him coffee so he could stay awake. The man agreed. Mark got his coffee, but it wasn't helping him much. If anything, it was messing his system even more. His body felt energized, but his mind felt very dull. The man, who was found and testified later, continued driving, and Mark felt somewhat at ease at this point. What Mark did not know was that he did not look like a regular hitchhiker. The watch he had won, the shoes he was wearing, even the bag he was carrying, looked and was expensive. He appeared rich, and the man who offered him a ride was someone who had done time for theft and robbery, among many other charges of similar nature. For someone like him, seeing a young man barely awake with such expensive accessories on him was like being served gold on a platter. He decided to take Mark away from Milton and rob him in the middle of nowhere. For some reason, the area he decided to drove towards was Brant. Mark was still sipping on his coffee, and something hit him. He realized he didn't really tell this man where he wanted to go. He simply stopped him and got on his car and asked for coffee. There was no dialogue shared regarding his destination. Mark cleared his throat and told him, "By the way, I need to get to Cambridge. Not sure I told you that." The man said, "Yes, that is exactly where we are headed." To Mark, the man sounded off, but he was too weak to act on it. A while later, Mark observed some signs on the road that suggested otherwise. He realized he is not being driven to Cambridge. That is when the driver began to pull over with a grin on his face. Mark put it all together, and without any hesitation, he tried to unlock the door and opened it to get out. The driver saw that and tried to pull him back towards him. Mark understood the gravity of the situation, and with all his strength, he punched him in the face. That resulted in the man letting go of Mark. Mark grabbed his coffee and spilled it on him and punched him again. It was like something had taken over Mark. His adrenaline had kicked in, and he became extremely focused on attacking this man. He punched him in the throat, pulled his hair, scratched his face, punched his nose repeatedly. The man attacked back, but Mark couldn't feel any of the attacks at this point. The door on Mark's side was still open. The driver managed to get Mark off him by kicking him in the face and on his knee. Mark fell out of the vehicle through passenger door, and the driver quickly drove away. Mark felt he may come back to hurt him again. At this point, his bag was gone with him, and his phone was completely dead. Therefore, he decided to hide in the field. He walked a few meters into it and sat down behind a tree. However, when the adrenaline calmed down, his system crashed awfully low, and he passed out. He woke up around 2 a.m. in the field, not having any idea what had happened, as he was experiencing a blackout due to the combination of substances in his system. Once he regained his energy, he carefully walked around, found a house in the field, and acquired the much-needed help from residents of that place. They gave him some food, water, and let him call Adam, who later came to get him. Serena and Mark worked things out. Months went by, and even though Mark barely remembers what had happened on that day, he still believes that man who offered him a ride saved his life by triggering his adrenaline and saved him for his system slowing down to a fatal stage. The anger and the flight and fight mode helped him regain control on his system. The irony shall fascinate him for years to come.